Fairchild.
Oh yes, help me, you've seen me work before.
No, no.
Thank you so much. It's so great to have so many women in business here, and women in power, and to have a whole effort in this area to create women in power. It's been somewhat disappointing sometimes when you see what's going on in the entertainment field. I had lunch with Gloria Steinem a couple of months ago when I was in New York, and we were talking about all the breakthroughs women of our generation tried to do so young women could be this proportion of engineering and science classes, and then to see some of them want to be Snooki. It's a little disappointing. But be that as it may, since this is such a great group, this may be a really silly question, but how many of you in this room could say that you're really happy with your life? God, almost everyone. Well, you guys can all go home, because what I wanted to talk to the people who are feeling a little iffy. It seems like the country these days is a little in a transition period, and feeling a little off-kilter, and sometimes a little scared. A lot of people seem to be a little scared, a little nervous, sometimes even desperate. And I certainly hear a lot about that with home values in California, the way they are. I don't know about here. Yeah. Well, Henry David Thoreau once said, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." These days it doesn't seem to be so quiet. It seems to have hit our whole society. So what I wanted to talk about is ways to deal with that, ways to feel that you are in charge of your life, ways to feel that you have made wise decisions. Because Thoreau also said it is not a characteristic of wisdom to do desperate things. So how do we go about making a wise decision, and not one born out of fear, not one born out of feelings of anxiety and desperation? And most people think actors have no fear. That is insane. We are driven by fear. We are in a business that lives on fear and intimidation. So fear and panic, those are all the things that most actors got into the business because of. We get into the business to take on some other character, take on another personality that hopefully is going to have a little better outcome than what we may have in our own lives. And one of my dear friends when I was growing up said something that I always remembered. He said, "Acting is reaching out in love to your fellow man." And I've tried to conduct my career that way, but I've also tried to conduct my life that way, because otherwise the fear can be kind of scary. It's something that I know something about, because I was, as Tony said, a very shy, very quiet, little fat kid with big, thick glasses, always in advanced placement, teacher's pet, never opened my mouth and made straight A's, and very lonely child that had asthma, caught everything that went around. And so I lived in my room, I lived with my books. My books were my world. But at one point, I decided I didn't want to just read about interesting people. I didn't want to live vicariously. I wanted to be one of those interesting people. I wanted to be someone that people would want to write books about. I wanted to take charge of my life and become that interesting person. And part of the way that sort of happened for me is, at one point in the 5th grade, we had to give an oral book report. The teacher that year did me a big favor. I didn't know it at the time. She made us give an oral book report. She didn't let me get away with writing it, as I'd always said, because I was a good writer. I just wasn't a good speaker, because I was shy. And 3 days in a row, I stood up in front of that class, and nothing would come out. And I'd go home and throw up. And my mother, who had lawyers in the family and, you know, history of debate teams at SMU, was just determined no child of hers was not going to be able to make an oral book report. So she got me through that, kind of walked me through how to do it. I lived through the experience, and then she went out and enrolled us in drama classes. Well, my sister was always a big personality kid. My sister loved drama classes, and again, I threw up every Saturday before I had to go. Because we had to do the same thing in drama class that I'd had to do in school, which is stand in front of people and talk and recite things, and I hated it. But at the end of the year, they let us put on a play. I liked that. I could hide behind somebody else. That was really kind of fun. And my mother saw this little opening of a way to, get the kiddos going. She's going to take us to an audition for the Junior Players Guild, this children's theater, very well-funded children's theater in Dallas. And so my sister and I go off, and I'm like dragging my heels. We get there, we sit in the back of the auditorium all day, watching all these kids come up and improvise scenes of being witches over cauldrons. And I'm sitting there thinking, God, I could do better than that. But I wouldn't. I wasn't going to go up there. I wasn't going to do anything. But then finally, my sister really wrecked my plan. She says, I want to audition. So she went up and auditioned. You know what this did? It meant if I didn't audition, I would be screamed at all the way home. So I have a career today because my fear of the stage is second only to my fear of my mother. That is the kind of difference that an adult can make in a kid's life. That man, Frank Conniff, that director that day, whatever he saw in the nerdy little kid with the glasses, gave me a part. It was a crummy little part. My sister and I were wood nymphs dancing around Snow White asleep in the forest. But it was something. And if he hadn't taken a chance, if he hadn't given that nerd kid a chance, I don't know if I would have ever had the nerve to go back. No. I would never have worked up the nerve. So, a lot of people over the years, because I kind of play bad guys for a living, people say, well, what would Maria Fairchild be afraid of? Honey, try being an aging vixen in my town, because I'm going to tell you, everything falls. There is not enough crazy glue in the world after a while. And also, we all live in Hollywood now, we all live in fear of these damn high definition, high definition cameras. Oh my God, those cameras that'll show every blade of grass on the football field make a 20-year-old look like Godzilla. So you can imagine how it feels being Godzilla's grandmother. But also, the thing is, I wasn't always Morgan Fairchild. I was Patsy McClinney, little shy, Fatsy Patsy, as the kids would call me. Believe me, I identify with any kid in this town who's ever been bullied. And I had to invent Morgan Fairchild. I had to sit down and say, who do I want to be? Because I don't want to be that person. And I invented the name, I invented the makeup, I invented the look, I invented who I wanted to be. I had a vision of who I wanted to be. And for every woman in this room, I hope you had a mother like I did. And I'd like to talk about my mother, because my mother was the most formative person in my career and in my life. And I was lucky enough to have her. I was lucky enough, my sister and I, to have a mother who loved us so unconditionally, who thought we were the best and the brightest and the smartest and could do anything. And of course, she was absolutely wrong, but she believed it. And as long as she believed it, it gave us the courage to try anything. And that's kind of what kids have to do, even if it takes a little shove to get up there on the stage. You have to have that courage of someone that thinks you're wonderful. And the good thing about my mom, she didn't just think we were wonderful. My mom was a high school English teacher. My mom thought every kid that walked into her classroom had so much potential. She saw the best in every single kid that walked in her room. And she brought out the best in them. And the kids of our relatives, and the kids of family friends who turned to my mom as a mom if their parents weren't as supportive, that have come back to me years later and say, oh, when I graduated, my mom didn't say anything, but your mom sent me a Steuben crystal #1, that I keep on my desk now even when I'm 50. But that kind of thing, to support, to give a kid that love, that support. Not a year goes by that I don't have different people come up to me in airports or restaurants or in different cities and say, I had your mom for high school English. I hated literature. Your mom made Julius Caesar live for me. And that's the kind of impact that a good teacher can have on a child's life. We talk a lot about these days about what's going on with the education system and teachers' unions and all the different things having to do with education. But that's the difference a good teacher can make in a kid's life. A good teacher can be pivotal in a kid's life. And, I've been very lucky. I've had so many new beginnings in my life. But I've also grabbed those new beginnings when they came along. I've had a chance to see something and have the guts to grab it. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of women have a hard time with, is we get in a rut or we get caught in a life process that we're already in. Sometimes we don't recognize a new opportunity when it's there, and then have the guts to go for it. How many women in this room have had things where they've really had to think about it and decide to really take a chance on things, take that flying leap and go off the cliff? In a successful room like this, I bet just about everybody. And I bet those were the decisions that got you where you are. The one where you had to take the flying leap. Because that's what it takes. That's what it takes. I remember when I was a kid, I just got divorced. I was 22. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. My friends were all getting out of college. I had no degree, divorced at 22. I could have stayed in Texas. I could have stayed there and gone back to school and stayed where it was safe. And I thought, no, I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to see if I go and I fail, I'll come back. I can always come back and start over here. But if I don't go, if I don't try, I'll never know. I'll be 50 years old kicking myself, wondering if I could have done something different. So I'm going to go. So I set out there. My sister and I were rooming together. She's going to Juilliard School of Drama, and I'm a divorced old lady at 22 doing dinner theater. And we would go out to dinner, and I'd go out with her class, most of whom were my age. And we'd go out to class, to dinner, and they'd all be saying, oh, what are you doing? Oh, what a dreadful play. Oh, I'd never do dinner theater. Oh, I'd never do a commercial. Oh, I'd never do this kind of stuff. Just dreadful. We're doing Shakespearean delineation. Olivier's fellow from London has come over, and we're doing House of Blue Leaves. And meanwhile, I'm picking up the check. Because they're all still living on allowance from home. And I'm the one out in the real world. Little by little, over the next year, those kids, when they graduated, those kids would come up to me in the bank line or the grocery line and say, why didn't you tell us how hard it was out here? Why didn't you tell us how hard it was? I mean, because if I could get an audition to get an agent, to get an audition for a dinner theater job, I would be happy. And I said, because you wouldn't believe me. Because you guys are so special. Nobody knows what it's like out in the real world until you get out in the real world. And then it kind of hits you between the eyes. But, so when I moved to New York, everybody in Dallas, they told me later, of course, didn't tell me at the time, they thought that New York would chew me up and spit me out because I was the shy, quiet little kid. And what they didn't count on is two things: that I had this great desire to make my life a great adventure, and that underneath the Barbie doll book, I had a spine of steel, and that I could take a kick and keep coming back. And that's one thing they don't teach you in drama school. And they don't teach you in any school. You only find out if you can take a kick when you get kicked. That's when you find out what you're really made of. That's what the people around you find out, what you're really made of. So, back when I was a kid, one of the things that stood me in very good stead the rest of my life, I was fortunate when I was 16, I was working on Bonnie and Clyde in the daytime and doing a funny thing happened on the way to the forum and going to high school and advanced placement. I could do all this stuff as long as I kept straight A's and advanced placement. And I was very excited because this was the first movie I'd worked on. And of course, no one knew it was going to be a hit and a classic and all of that at that time. It was just a movie they were shooting in Texas, out in the middle of nowhere, which in Texas was really the middle of nowhere. And but one night I got invited to a cast party, and so I arrived, and I just always remember it was one of those very 60s kind of surreal scenes. One of the actors had a lovely young wife who opened the door in a totally see-through muumuu in day-glow orange with no underwear on. And I was, little Miss White Bread America here. I was not really ready for this. But I went in, and it was kind of a very strange Hollywood party. And so I stayed for a little while. I'm so boring, I'm so straight. I never did any drugs, I never smoked, I never drank. I'm really a dud. Not recovering anything, so I left. And the next day, I'm at the theater with my friends, and one of the older actors who was a mentor, we're walking back from dinner, and he said, you seem kind of down. Are you okay? And I said, well, I was working on this movie, and I really love movies. This is what I think I would really like to do. But this is the reality of this business. And I don't fit in. I really don't fit in. I'm too straight. I don't fit in. And I walked out on that party last night, but I can't keep walking out on reality. And he gave me the best piece of advice I ever got. He said, nonsense. You can always walk out on reality. And I did. I decided right then I would go into this business, but I would create my own reality. And I know every woman in this room has done some version of this in order to succeed in the world that you started out in, the way the world was at that time in a business world, which was mostly men, to create your own reality in which you function according to your rules that you can live with and look at yourself in the mirror and feel comfortable. And that's what I did. So when I moved to Hollywood, a lot of people said, oh, you'll never get ahead, you gotta go to the right parties and do the right drugs and sleep with the right people. And I said, well, I guess I won't get ahead then. Because it was never worth my soul. And yet, at this advanced age, when people sort of say, gee, what do you do? I said, well, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't go do the drugs, I didn't go in the sun. And I always think back, because my mom used to say, at 20, you have the face God gave you. And at 40, you have the face you've earned. And at my age, you've got the face you've earned and paid for. But it is a lot better and easier if you've done some upkeep along the way, and a lot cheaper. But you also kind of have to learn to stand up for yourself, but learn when to hold them and when to fold them. Look, when I first got to LA, my first big audition for a TV movie, I was so excited, I really wanted a TV movie on my credit list here now. So I go in, and it's for a rip-off of the movie Carrie. and a TV movie. And so the Carrie character's already been cast. But there's two other women. One is the sister of Carrie, who is torn between her love of her sister and being in the hip sorority. And one is the evil sorority queen. So they have me read, of course, for the evil sorority queen. I think it's the nose. They always have me read for the evil. But so the producer says, oh, you're cast, you can have this. And I said, can I read for the sister? Because she's torn between these two things. I think he'd have so many more gray areas, a young actor. And he says, honey, you haven't been here very long, have you? And I said, no, sir. And he said, let me explain something to you. I can get a good ingenue anywhere, but a good itch is hard to find. And that's what makes any story work. The bad guy is the catalyst for everything. And if the bad guy doesn't work, the story doesn't work. He said, think of Shane without Jack Palance. Think of any good movie you've ever seen without a good bad guy. The bad guy makes it work. The ingenue can walk through it. I said, oh, okay. So I took it, thank goodness I took it. It set me on my road to itchdom. And I didn't listen to him. He didn't listen to me. He did what he thought was right, and for once, I gave in. But on the other hand, sometimes you have to know when to hold them. And I always remember one time, I was doing a TV movie in Vegas, and the producer decided he was going to try to teach me to play blackjack. So we're down at the blackjack table at Caesars, and he leans over and he says, your agent is just brilliant. And I said, really? Oh, that's great. Actors love to hear this. I said, well, why do you think he's wonderful? And he said, actors never want to hear this, but he had the guts to walk away from this 3 times. We did not have this kind of money in the budget for your part, but he had the guts to walk away 3 times. This guy is, And I said, well, that's so good to hear, Harry. Do you know why he walked away? And he said, no. He says, because I told him to. He would have taken your first offer. So sometimes it's the evil blonde behind the agent that actually kind of generates the money. Well, one of the other things that growing up and being a woman in that kind of world back when I was a kid, one of the things I think it's hardest for women to do is to learn to say no. Women are by nature the nurturers. We want everything to work out. We work so much better as a team, no matter what the football guys say. We work better as a team effort on problem solving, and it's just very hard for women to say no. And for young women, I think these days, they have so much pressure on them. But one lesson I learned very early on, if they don't like you because you said no, honey, they didn't like you very much to begin with. And they're not really your friend. So what have you got to lose? Somebody's not gonna like you because you didn't drink, or you didn't go to that party, or you didn't do whatever. You haven't really lost very much. So in that same realm, it's define yourself. Do not let other people define you. Do not let them define you by their low expectations. I've spent my whole life with this. I learned when I first started going to DC to lobby on things, if I walked into somebody's office or walked onto the Senate floor, if I could walk and chew gum at the same time, they were blown away. I look like a Barbie doll, but I'm not. And I remember one time doing Face the Nation, and I had said that a new law that was passed would eviscerate the current existing law. I had people for 3 years come up to me and be blown away that I knew the word eviscerate. And that's not even a $10 word. I mean, imagine what I could have done with the lugubrious. But you just start realizing how little is expected if you're blonde and a girl and an actress and a little small person, that everybody thinks they can run over you. But I quickly found that outside of show business, because show business can be a little silly, a little stifling, that I could continue to live up to my passions, as Tony mentioned, on environmental activism. I'm a science nerd. I mean, even when I was doing Flamingo Road, I was taking anthropology in night school at UCLA. The crew would get a big kick out of it because I'd be in my little silk teddies with all my marabou and I'd be sitting there working on hemispheric dysfunction of the brain. And the crew would come over and say, okay guys, we gotta move Morgan's books. Everybody go, move Morgan's books out of the shot. But it was always the unexpected, but I've kept up my interest in science. One of my hobbies is emerging viruses and epidemiology. It's why I knew so much about the AIDS virus. When Rock Hudson got sick, I was the only celebrity they could have that could go on Nightline and explain what a retrovirus is and how it works in layman's terms, that people could understand, and try to take the stigma off of it. Testifying before a Senate Committee on Desert Preservation, I managed to drag out this new concept called global warming and explain to them what it was going to do to weather patterns in 1987. Wish they'd listen. Gore and I were the first two people talking about global warming on the Hill. But little by little, you sort of learn how to stand up for yourself, how to make people take you seriously. And I got a few good lessons from my mom. Back when I was a kid, one of the shows I was doing, funny thing happened on the way to the forum. If any of you guys have ever seen this show, it's a musical, but it's also, the girls are in bikinis a lot, not a lot on. Not a lot of protection. And I had one girl in the show who every night, she was like whacking me and hitting me, and I'm coming home black and blue all the time. And I came in crying one night to my mom, and because I'm this shy kid, I said, I've never done anything to this woman. Why is she doing this to me? I had no idea. I'm 16, what could I have done to her? And my mother, good Texas mother, said, you say this to her and she will never touch you again. And I said, oh, she'll never believe that. She knows me. She's not gonna believe that if I say that. And she says, say this to her, and if you say it like you mean it, she will never touch you again. So that night, I went in, I worked up all my guts. Sure enough, we got into one rehearsal. She reaches across, whacks me across the face. In which point I grabbed her wrist, and I just looked at her and I said, if you ever touch me again, I will knock you across the room. She never touched me. It worked. I couldn't believe it. Mother was right. There's something about striking fear into people. And I have to tell you, this has stood me in good stead. I mean, I'm on the board of the Screen Actors Guild, and we got a lot of weirdo actors, okay? And so, I mean, and lovely people, but these kind of lessons stand you in good stead. A couple of years ago, we're having a big debate on merging with another union. All of a sudden, one of the actors, lovely character actor, I won't say his name because you would know him, and he but drunk as a skunk. Drinks too much. Drunk as a skunk in the middle of the day. He sees me standing there against the wall with a cup of coffee. He comes running over, mad at me because of this debate. Comes over and says, get in that kitchen, Blondie, I want to talk to you. I'm saying, I'm so sorry, I'm not going in the kitchen. I've heard the sexual harassment stories. So I'm not going in the kitchen. He says, get in that kitchen, Blondie, I want to talk to you. You need to hear something. I said, I'm so sorry, I'm not going in there with you. So finally, he makes the big mistake of laying hands on me and starts trying to drag me into the kitchen. Well, at this point, I am older now, and I've also had 4.5 years of Kung Fu in Chinatown. So at this point, it is real tiger claw, take your hands off me, or you're gonna get knocked across the room, got it? At which point he let go and he never touched me again. But it's that kind of thing of being willing to stand up for yourself and having the guts to scare people if they don't. Because sometimes if you're little and blonde and a woman and an actor, that's what it takes, is to actually scare them. But my mom always told a story about when I was a kid, and I'd forgotten this story. Again, standing up for yourself. I'd done a bunch of commercials for a local drugstore in town. I got married really young. Husband was in rock and roll business, lost a lot of money. I'm supporting him and his mother. Did this series of commercials. Now we have not much money. It's coming up on Christmas, and these people still haven't paid me. That's been like 9 months, and they still haven't paid, and the agents called, everybody's called, keep getting blown up. So I didn't want to, but I just walked over to the company, to the advertising company, and I sat myself down in the president's office, and I wouldn't leave. And I'm this kid, teenager, sitting in the president's office, and I wouldn't leave. And the secretary's trying to, oh, he's not here, but I can hear him on the phone. I'm a little glum, but I'm not stupid. And I can hear him on the phone, so I wait. And finally, at the end of the day, I guess he wanted to go home. He finally came out, and he looks at me. He didn't even make any pretense. He didn't even say, oh, who are you? What are you doing here? He just looked at me and he said, how about if I give you half the money? And I said, did I do half the work? And I got my money. And we had a pretty good Christmas. But sometimes it takes that kind of thing. The other thing for women is, don't be afraid to ask. I think a lot of times women, not the ladies in this room so much, because you've obviously asked for a lot, but are afraid to ask. And some of the best adventures I have ever had in my life are because I had the nerve to ask for something. When we were over shooting in Bosnia, as Tony mentioned, and this is in '94, this is in the middle of the war. The Dayton Accords are 2 years away. The Washington Agreement has just gone in, the Washington Pact, so supposedly they're not killing each other, but they are. And so everywhere I'm going, I'm surrounded by UN guys, and guys with big guns who are getting drunk on plum brandy in the middle of the day. And every 3 guys with guns who have nothing to do because they're not supposed to be killing each other have set up barricades to extort money out of anybody who wants to get by. But at one point, got to be friends with the ambassador to Croatia, our ambassador to Croatia. And so, not much going on in Zagreb, and we're the only movie company in town, so he's having parties for us all the time. So this is fun. And we go there one night, and I say, I'd love to go out and see some of the real country if you're going out at some point when I have day off. So one day he called and said, listen, I'm going to go over to no man's land today, and there's a bunch of meeting of generals and stuff over at no man's land between Croatia and Serbia, Krajina. You want to go? And then we can go to some refugee camps. So I said, sure. So we take off with the Croatian bodyguards, because the Marines guard the embassy, but the host country gives the bodyguards for the ambassador. So we've got our Croatian bodyguards. We go through the anti-tank devices, look like big jacks sitting in the road. We get into no man's land. A lot of press there coming up, Dr. Morgan, Fairchild, what are you doing here? And meeting with the generals, and looking around this blown up town where the houses are gone, but the gardens are coming back, and it's spring, and the daffodils are blooming, and the wisteria is blooming, but the houses are blown up. And out of the blue comes this little Polish UN guy, speaks good English. He comes up, Morgan, Fairchild, we are big fans of yours in Poland, what are you doing here? So I say, tell them, and we're in here, we've got razor wire everywhere, and walked out in the center of the road for landmines and stuff like that. We're close to the Serbs. And so I say, listen, how close can I get over there without freaking them out? Because I'm taking pictures of everything. And I'd love to get a picture of the Cyrillic on the flag there without freaking them out, because, it's a bunch of tanks and they're all aimed at us. And so he says, oh, you want to take a picture? Come on over here, we'll take a picture. So I say, okay, so we go over and take a picture, and I say, how close can we really get? And he says, oh, you want to get closer? He said, hey guys, come out of the tank, take a picture. Yes. So we're taking pictures with, all the razor wire and the tanks and the whole thing, and then I'm looking and saying, God, I wish we could go into Krajina. He says, you want to go into Krajina? Come on, go into Krajina. So, the 3 of us start down this asphalt road with the razor wire right in the middle of the road so we don't get blown up, hopefully. And it's beautiful spring, grass is green, looks beautiful, doesn't look war-torn at all, and, we have to leave the Croatians back there in no man's land. So we're walking down the road and we're saying, God, where's your encampment? He's like, oh, up on the hill where we can keep an eye on everybody. I said, oh, he says, you want to go? Come on, let's go. So we hike up the hill. We're up there in the razor wire sandbag bunker. All the guys are coming out in towels, shaving. I'm doing my own USO tour, taking pictures with everybody. Yeah. and all of a sudden we get the thing on the walkie-talkie, have you guys still got the American ambassador? We'd really like to get him back. so they put us on a troop drop and, jump us down the hill and we get back there. But it's that kind of thing. If you keep asking, I'm probably the only actor, maybe very few Americans even, getting into serve Ukraine in the middle of the war. Now some people may not think that's so much fun, but I thought it was very interesting. For me, it was a big adventure I'll never forget. So at this point in our lives, in our time, in our country, with everything that's going on, each of us has the chance to start over again. Each of us has a chance to be that child beginning the world again. Each of us has a chance to reinvent ourselves, our place in our culture, our place in life. And so I hope all of us will take that opportunity because there's no time to waste. As Thoreau said, as if you could kill time without injuring eternity. And for me, that's the key, because no indecisions, no recriminations, no self-doubt, because these are not characteristics of wisdom. So I hope if I can leave you with anything today, it's just to embrace your fears and to define yourself and find your own reality and create the world all over again. And whatever you do, don't fritter away eternity. And everything will be good. And I thank all of you ladies and all of you for supporting the wonderful business ventures here and for the women. And thank you so much for what the Florida Institute of Technology is doing to support all the different women's ventures here. Thank you so much.